Good morning. Good morning. Um, Linda, you're muted. I see you're saying something, but you're muted. I could ask you to unmute. There you go.
Here I am. Good
Mm.
morning. Nice to see you.
Hello, Judy. How are you?
Morning.
Hi, Judy.
Let's wait another minute. Meanwhile, I'll share my screen. Feel free to get some coffee or whatever. Um, let's see what will be the best way to do this. Do that. Okay. Do you see the video behind me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any of you ever seen this before?
Yes.
Yeah.
You've seen this video or you've seen this image?
No, I've seen the temple. You know, the reconstruction in Israel. I had Ramat Sharet is where I stayed for 10 weeks when my son was being bar mitzvahed in 1979. And the Holy Land Hotel had that was what they were known for, that the temple model first.
Oh, wow. But Judy, you said you saw this video before? You're muted now. Sorry.
Oh, just the image, not the video.
Got it, got it. So we're not going to be watching the video per se, but I'm going to use the video as my slideshow. I could, I wonder if I could send the video afterwards, but it's definitely very informative. Good morning, Anita.
Good
Welcome.
morning.
To see
Good
you.
morning, everyone.
Hi, Anita.
Hi.
Uh, okay, we are waiting for one person at least, but good start. It's 10 o'clock. Okay, so
Mm.
we're going to begin, and this class is slightly of a different style class than what we're used to. I think every week it's been slightly of a different style. But in any case, the style this week that I want to focus on, especially considering that we're in the 3 weeks, and is everyone familiar or is anyone familiar with what the 3 weeks are?
Weeks of mourning.
3 weeks of mourning, right? So we have from the 17th of Tammuz till the 9th of Av are 3 weeks of mourning. We're mourning the destruction of the temple. And specifically today, or I should say yesterday, starts what's called the 9 days leading up to the 9th of Av, from the 1st of Av till the 9th of Av, which takes on a stricter level of mourning. And finally, we'll have the fast on Sunday, which hopefully won't be a fast this year, hopefully will be a holiday with the coming of Mashiach, which will be, the final day of actually commemorating the destruction of the temple. And the reason why this is so special and important is because the Torah tells us that if someone didn't experience the rebuilding of the temple in his days, it's as if it was destroyed in his days. And for us, hopefully, we want to have somewhat of an experience of recognizing the holiness and the specialty of the Holy Temple to us as the Jewish people, recognizing that this is God's love to the Jewish people. He wishes to dwell within us, and he did so through the Holy Temple. And when we sinned, that's when it was taken from us, and God willing, it will be returned to us very, very soon. The story is told regarding this coming Shabbat, this coming Sabbath. This coming Shabbat has a unique name. The Shabbos before Tisha B'Av is called Shabbat Chazon, the holiday of vision. Sorry, not the holiday of vision, but the Shabbat of vision. And the reason why it's called that is because we read a special Haftorah during that Shabbat, which starts with the words Chazon Yeshayahu. It's a part of the prophets. However, we are taught by our sages that another reason why it's called Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbat of vision, is because every single person on this Shabbos, the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, every Jew is shown a vision of the third temple. Now, the fact that we don't necessarily know that we're shown such a vision is because it's more our subconscious that is shown this vision, not necessarily our conscious self, but that does something for our conscious self. What does it do for our conscious self? So the story is told about a king that had a prince, a one and only child. And the king loved this prince so much that he created for this prince a beautiful garb, a beautiful robe for this prince to wear. And sure enough, the prince was a little bit of a wild child and completely destroyed this garment. So the king loved this prince so much, he created another one. And after some time, once again, the prince destroyed the second garment. So the king created a third garment, but this time he didn't give it to the prince. He told the prince, when you are ready, when you're old enough and you're ready to put on another garment, that's when I will be giving you this third garment. But until then, it will be in a safe place. But every year, once a year, he would take it out and he would show it to him and he would say, this is the garment that I prepared for you, which is going to be yours one day. And so too, every year on the Shabbos of Chazon, of seeing the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, God shows us a vision of the third temple, saying, I've given you two in the past, but it didn't work out. You were too premature to handle it, to keep it holy. But there's a third one incoming. I didn't give up on you guys, but I need you guys to grow up a little bit. So that's the message of Tisha B'Av in a positive light. Now, studying about the Holy Temple and what it looked like is not only interesting. It's obviously interesting from a historical point of view, from a just understanding what was, and especially if you go to the Western Wall, understanding what you're standing at, etc. But it's not only that. The sages tell us that when we study about the Holy Temple and about the way it was built, we are actually actively taking part in rebuilding the Holy Temple. How is that? The answer is because we know in Torah, any mitzvah that we cannot accomplish, give me 1 second. Every mitzvah that we cannot accomplish physically, we accomplish through studying Torah. That's what our sages tell us. So the fact that we cannot bring sacrifices these days because we don't have a temple, we don't have an altar, we substitute that by the study of Torah. We study about sacrifices, and that's how we bring the sacrifices. I don't know if you're familiar, but if you look in your Haggadah, for Passover, you'll see that one of the first things that are found in the Haggadah is the order of the Paschal sacrifice. To read how the Paschal sacrifice was brought in the Holy Temple. We're actually going to see a little bit about that today. And the reason why we read that, the power of reading that, is simply because by reading about the Paschal sacrifice, it's as if we brought the Paschal sacrifice. So say our sages, in a time where we don't have the Holy Temple, we can't do certain commandments, by studying about it, it's as if we've done it. And similarly, by studying about building the Holy Temple and the laws that it consists of, it's as if we ourselves are building it. So it's not just a beautiful, historical, interesting thing to do, but it's a very special thing to do, especially during these days of the 3 weeks and the 9 days. Okay, so let us begin with talking about the Holy Temple. That was just the introduction. I want to go a little bit into the history before we talk about the actual Holy Temple.
In the bathroom, you're doing the kitchen.
Good morning, BA. Welcome from Israel. Welcome home.
Thank you. We are home now. I'm home. Ben is in Israel.
Yes. So
And
when
today
did
I have my nephew Josh with me. You'll see in a minute.
okay, welcome, Josh. So when did you get back?
Yesterday. Oh no, Friday. Friday. Sorry, I lost my mind. Friday morning I got back.
Were you at the Kotel at all, or were you at the Western Wall?
Yep, on my birthday last Monday. Went there. Yeah, Ben and I went. It's very powerful.
Beautiful. So we're gonna have to visit exactly where that is in this structure that you're looking at over here. So I'm going to turn on the video just so you have some entertainment in my background, but but I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the temples, as it were. So the original commandment to build a temple from God wasn't actually to build a physical permanent structure, as you see the building of the temple. Rather, it was to simply build a dwelling place for God. That was in the desert, right? And the Jewish people are traveling the desert for 40 years. Generally, according to most commentaries, this happened immediately after the golden calf. So God gave the Torah. The Jewish people brought the golden calf, which was a big sin. And in order to atone for such a sin, God said, build a home for me in this world, and I will dwell there. The language is Vasuli Mikdash, create for me a sanctuary, Vishachanti betocham, and I will dwell within them. And the Jewish people went ahead to build this sanctuary for God, which was called the Mishkan, right? This was the sanctuary that existed within the desert. This Mishkan was more like a tent than a home. It was movable. It was made up of many, many beams of wood covered with gold, with rings and links that held up these beams. And then with that, there were animal hides that went over these animal hides, as well as woven materials that went over these beams to create this structure of a tent. Well, we might see such a structure soon in the video. The general format of this structure was that there was the actual main sanctuary, which was covered by material, and then there was what was called the courtyard. In the courtyard was the altar, the Mizbeach. So in every one of the temples that followed, we had a similar concept, where we had the main sanctuary, and then we had the courtyard that followed. So if I'm going to skip around a little bit and find over here where that would have been. Oh, so here you have the Mishkan. This is what I was talking about. Here are the camps of the Jewish people all around it. This is where Moses was. And here you have the actual Mishkan. And you could see there's the courtyard. Here's the altar. Do you see my mouse?
Yeah, I can't see that. Are you projecting it?
Yeah, you can't see behind the screen behind me?
No, I don't in my view. Don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Linda, do you see it? Anita,
Yes,
Yes,
very clear.
Which view do you have? Oh, there.
Yeah.
We just found it. Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so you have over here the courtyard. You have the altar. That's the altar that I'm pointing at right now. You see my mouse?
No, that's not.
Yes.
Okay. And then
I
this
just-
little house, this little structure here, which is very little, actually. It's about 20 feet by 60 feet. That's the whole thing. That structure is split into two. 2/3 of it being what's called the holy, and the last third being what's called the Holy of Holies, the Holy Ark, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that had the Kruvim, the two images of children with the wings spread over it. That existed in this last third, as we'll see later on. So that was the original Mishkan. Every single temple following that had a similar build, where it had that in that main structure. However, it also had additional things, as we'll see. This temple existed, this Mishkan existed while the Jews were in the desert. When they came to Israel, this became a little bit more permanent by at one point, eventually actually having brick walls, but still the ceiling was not brick. The ceiling remained material. And this moved to a number of places, none of them being in Jerusalem. Only many years later, King David conquered Jerusalem, and then he bought the Mount Moriah, and he was shown by God that this is the place where the temple is supposed to exist. This is the place the temple is supposed to be. And he got ready to build the first holy temple. However, he was told that he will not be the one to actually build the temple. And the reason for this is because he had blood on his hands. Only King Solomon, who followed him, who lived in a time of peace, and he did not fight any wars because of his father, who led that path, who led that way. Only King Solomon was able to build the actual holy temple for God. Now, the reason why this is so significant to build the temple is for a number of reasons. First of all, because of the location that it was on. As much as we had temples beforehand, however, only when the temple came to Mount Moriah did it actually find its proper resting place, the place that God intended it to be from day one. And to talk a little bit about the importance of this mountain, right? And we know this mountain because this is the mountain that that western wall is on, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But to talk about what the significance of this mountain is. So for starters, this mountain is the mountain that Abraham brought Jacob as brought Isaac as a sacrifice on, right? We know the story of the Akedat Yitzchak, where God told Abraham, bring your son and sacrifice him as a sacrifice to me. This was on this very mountain, Mount Moriah. Years later, when Jacob was traveling and he stopped in the middle of his travels and he went to sleep and he saw the vision of the ladder, right? We're familiar with that vision. That dream also happened on Mount Moriah. He was actually on Mount Moriah at that time. And another occurrence that happened on this very mountain would be the sacrifices of Noah when the great flood ended and Noah came out of his ark. He brought sacrifices to God. He too sacrificed his sacrifices on this very mountain, as well as Cain and Abel, when they brought their sacrifice at the very beginning of creation. They also brought their sacrifices on this mountain, as well as Adam, the very first man who sacrifices to God. He brought it on this mountain. And to top it all off, we know that Adam was created in the earth. Adam was created from the earth. It says that God formed a body out of the earth, and then he blew in it the spirit of life, and that's how he created Adam. The location that God created Adam was on this very mountain. So that is to sum up a little bit of the history before and the importance of this space, where clearly it has a lot of significance, that we have all this history behind it. So that was number one, the importance of King Solomon, creating a sanctuary on this mountain because of the location, it being the location, the proper location for the Holy Temple. However, there's another point here, which is that finally the space for God, the home for God, took on a permanent location. And the importance of this is understanding also the importance of this place, of the Holy Temple. The importance of the Holy Temple ties into the purpose of creation. Linda, do you have a question?
No, thank you. Thank you.
Sure. So the purpose of creation, as we know it, is to bring God into this world. And the reason why we didn't have a holy temple for all the years until King Solomon built the holy temple is because a holy temple represents creating a permanent space for God in this world. And until the world was ready for it, that could not have happened. So the reason why we were able to create a sanctuary for God in the desert was because God gave us the Torah. And now that God gave us the Torah, we were able to bring God down into our home. So the significance of creating a home for God in this world is fulfilling the ultimate purpose of creation, which is making this world a home for God, starting with a physical structure, a specific physical structure. However, at the beginning of time, when we were first given the Torah in the desert, that work of elevating this world has only begun, and therefore we were not able to bring it down into an actual permanent structure. The structure was extremely temporary. As time went on, that structure became more and more permanent because we got to a place further and further in this purpose where we elevated this world. And finally, only in the days of King Solomon did we build a permanent structure, which clearly showed how much the world has been elevated and where we've gotten to in terms of fulfilling this purpose of bringing God into this world. I'm going back to this section in the video because this is a general image of the Temple of Solomon. This is the first temple. So the temple that I've been showing you before is the second temple. And this image right here, I'll just play it in a second. This is the first temple. So you'll see it's very similar to the second temple in a certain sense. However, the second temple was much, much larger and much more beautiful than the first holy temple, which also shows on how much more permanent it was, that over the years, again, God's dwelling place in this world became that much more permanent, that much more part of creation, that much more quote unquote regular. So here, this is Solomon's temple, and here we go on to the second temple. Now, the second temple, in terms of the history of it, it actually initially was not a very nice building. When the Jewish people were given permission by Cyrus to go up and rebuild the Holy Temple, they did not have any money. They were very, very poor. They weren't well off. And they built a structure that was very poor compared to what the Holy Temple should actually look like. It was more like an excuse for a temple. And it was in constant need of repair, and it was falling apart. Until finally there was a king by the name of Hordus. I don't know the English name for Hordus. Does anyone know the English name for King Hordus? I'm not remembering his name. He actually didn't like the rabbis because the rabbis didn't consider him the king because he wasn't really Jewish, and to be a king of the Jewish people, you had to be Jewish. So he actually tried to kill all the rabbis that lived in those days. And he was very successful to a certain extent, until at one point he realized that this was a mistake of his, and he wanted to repent. And the rabbis that were still around said, if you want to repent, do us a favor and beautify God's home. And he went ahead and he himself employed thousands of employers and created this beautiful structure, including a part of it which was specific for himself. He named it for himself, as we will talk about. So over here in this image that you're seeing, this is what I'm pointing to right now. That is the actual temple. And in comparison to the Mishkan that we spoke about earlier, this wall would be the courtyard. And then this structure here, this building, would be the actual building where the Holy of Holies, as well as the Holy, existed within this building, as we'll see in more detail. This whole wall over here is the Temple Mount. This is not the courtyard, rather it's the Temple Mount. The initial measuring of this space, the initial dimensions of this space, as in King Solomon's times, was 500 amot by 500 amot. Amot is a Hebrew measuring, which roughly is 2 feet. So just for the sake of this conversation, we're going to always translate it to be 2 feet. So if it was 500 by 500, that would be 1,000 square feet. That was this space, which is the Temple Mount. Hordus came around and he added over here another 250 feet. He named it for himself, and he built this beautiful canopy over here. And this area was simply an area for people that came. Welcome, Lisa. For people that came to the Holy Temple to rest up.
Thank you.
Um,
Welcome.
so it was for people to rest up, put their stuff down. All along these walls that you see here, there was a little bit of a roof with beams holding it up, and people were able to sit down. There were benches there, and they were able to put down their stuff. During the holiday of Sukkot, if the holiday was on the Sabbath, and therefore people were not able to carry their lulav and etrog to the Holy Temple for services, which I imagine would happen in this courtyard, they would actually leave it under these little roofs on the side to protect it from the rain, and that's where it would stay until they came in the morning of Sukkot and used the lulav and etrog. So this is the Temple Mount. Does anyone know in this image where the western wall would be, or does anyone want to try to guess?
West.
Any ideas?
I think behind it, right?
Behind it, right? But okay, let me see if I can get to a better place, or he's already here. Oh, so here we have the Temple Mount.
Mhm.
Let me see. So if you have this image here, so this, Lisa, what were you referring to when you said behind it?
You're talking about the wall, the western wall?
Yes.
So wouldn't it be behind the structure? Like,
Over here or over here?
yeah, I think like somewhere, yeah, like right over there.
Right? So a lot of people think that the Western Wall was the Western Wall of the temple, so that would be this wall. But in
Right.
reality, the Western Wall is the Western Wall of the Temple Mount. So it's not actually part of the temple. When the Romans destroyed the temple, they destroyed the entire temple, this entire structure, as well as all of these walls around the Temple Mount and most of the Western Wall. And what's interesting is a few things. First of all, the part of the wall that is actually visible over here in this image over the Temple Mount does not exist anymore. It doesn't stand anymore. It was destroyed. So what we see is only the part of the wall that's actually attached to the mountain. Yes, does that make sense? You're
Mhm.
following me?
Mhm.
The top of the wall does not exist. In addition, I don't know if Bia you went and saw this, but now that they excavated, they found that there's lower down, right
Mhm.
under the Kotel Plaza, there's the old city, and over there, the Western Wall continues downward. So what we're actually seeing when we look at the Western Wall is only the top half of the bottom part of the wall, if that makes sense. Additionally, give me 1 second. Additionally, the part that we stand on in the plaza is a very limited part of the wall. I think it would be accurate to say, if you see my cursor, that it only goes roughly from here to here. This part of the wall is what we have in the plaza. I'm not sure if the rest of the wall exists or part of it is destroyed, but this is generally this part of the cursor that I'm showing you right now is the area where we stand at the Western Wall, which is extremely interesting. The history of that is that when the Romans tried to destroy the temple and they were successful, they were not able to destroy this part of the wall. No matter what they did, no matter how they tried to destroy it, it would simply not be destroyed. And obviously, God wanted it to be there so we could remember that it was there, the Holy Temple was there, and to keep our spirit and to look forward to a time where we will have the Holy Temple once again. Now, there was a period of time, there's a great story of a rabbi which traveled up to Jerusalem a number of years after the destruction of the temple, maybe 150 years after the destruction of the temple, and he wanted to see the Western Wall. He knew about the Western Wall and he wanted to see it and pray there. And when he came to Mount Moriah, he was not able to find the mountain. And instead of finding the mountain, instead of finding the wall, he actually found a pile of garbage, a garbage dump. And what he found out over time was that shortly after the destruction of the Holy Temple, the Romans wanted to conceal this wall because they knew that this wall would remain as a sign for the Jewish people for the rebuilding of the temple, and therefore they created a decree. And they said anyone throwing out their trash should throw it in this location. And their hope was that over some time, the wall would be covered and would be completely forgotten for forever. And they were successful. And people came and everyone threw out their trash over there. And the wall was completely non-visible. And if you asked someone in the city, where is this wall? No one had any idea what you were talking about. However, he realized that the wall was here, and he was desperate to bring back that glory of the Western Wall for the Jewish people. So he came up with an idea, and one day he went over there, and with a shovel, or maybe not with a shovel, he was just walking over there, and he at one point he bends down and he starts screaming, and people come over. What happened? He said, "I found gold," and he shows them a little bit of gold that he found in this pile of rubbish, and people started looking and coming, and started planting, different pieces of gold throughout the garbage, and every few days people started finding gold. It became like the gold rush. Everyone started coming with their shovels, searching through all this trash, looking for gold. BA, are you trying to say something? You're muted.
I'm trying to get my dog to stop barking, but you're good.
Oh, okay. So they, eventually over time, they were all looking for the treasure that lies beneath this rubbish, and eventually, finally, they cleared it all out, and the actual treasure that they were looking for, the wall, the beautiful Western Wall, was revealed. And on that day, you looked at the wall; it was disgusting. It smelled. It's been sitting in this garbage for so long. And on that day, God clearly saw the plight of this Jew, and it started pouring rain. It started pouring rain. Maybe I'm not sure if it rained for 3 days or for it rained for a while, and it cleaned up the whole wall. And that was the story of the revelation of the Western Wall and how it was returned to us after trying to be taken, even after the Romans could not destroy it. So that's a little bit about the Western Wall. Let's get back to the actual Holy Temple. So what he was showing us over here a moment ago, which is very interesting to talk about, is the mountain before the actual building. So here you have the actual mountain, right? Mount Moriah, and it was built on this mountain. The way it was built is, as you could see, they created these arches, and it was one arch on top of the other. So you had a few layers. It wasn't just one layer of arches. They could have did that all the way up. They did a few layers. The reason why they did a few layers is because in the Holy Temple it was very important to remain pure, that it shouldn't be contaminated, that if someone was contaminated from, let's say, he was exposed to a dead body, and therefore they were contaminated, they were not allowed to be in this holy structure of the temple. And therefore, it was very important to create a system where impurity would not travel. And rooftops allow impurity to travel. When you have a roof over a home, and let's say there's a dead body in the home, the entire home becomes impure. So by creating a system where you had many, many roofs, and some roofs actually went over the other, you created a safe space where if there were to be something non-clean in one area, would remain in that area, and the rest of the areas would remain pure. In addition, in all of these little caves that you're seeing here, including within the mountain itself, there were many, many spaces that people were able to go down from the temple into these caves, and there were a lot of mikvahs there to purify themselves in, as well as storage spaces, as well as other spaces, including most notably the storage space for the Holy Ark. So we'll talk about that a little later, hopefully. But the point is that when King Solomon built this temple, he knew that one day it would be destroyed. And he knew that when it's destroyed, he wants that the Holy Ark should be hidden. And before the temple was destroyed, the first temple, he took the Holy Ark, or not he, but the king at the time, took the Holy Ark and put it in its designated hiding spot within the mountain. This hiding spot exists inside Mount Moriah, perfectly adjacent to its location on top of the mountain. And the significance is twofold. First of all, that the Holy Ark was never taken from us. And second of all, that essentially the Holy Temple still exists, although the physical building doesn't exist, but the Holy Ark is still there in its proper location. Understanding the significance of the fact that it's there and it's ready to be redeemed, and when Mashiach comes, we will have it once again, definitely is very special and important. So that is a little bit about the actual Temple Mount. On the temple, you see that that although he covered most of the temple, there were two parts that remained uncovered. And sorry, not the temple, I mean the mountain. The reason why those two parts are uncovered, because there are two areas of the Holy Temple which actually have to be touching the mountain. Number one, the Holy Ark. The Holy Ark was actually sitting on a rock, which was the tip of the mountain. And secondly, the altar. The altar had to be, the main altar for the sacrifices had to be sitting on the mountain itself, which is the second part that remained uncovered. This whole structure, which was the foundation of the Holy Temple, was then filled up, was covered by a wall and filled up with whatever material he filled it up with. And here you have the image of the Temple Mount on which the Holy Temple was built. Now he's pointing out those two rocks that I mentioned earlier. Okay, now let us go back to discover the actual temple. And here we are. Here we go. Let's see a second. So here we are. So here we are in the actual Temple Mount. This is that courtyard that I spoke about before, and you could see the beams on the side where people were able to go and rest up and also be shaded from the rain or from the sun. And here are the front doors to the actual temple sanctuary. Now, along the temple walls, there were many, many different rooms that lined the walls. And here we're going to see some of them from the outside, and then maybe we'll see some of them from the inside later on. The first room that we have over here is called the Lishkas Hagazis. The Lishkas Hagazis was a location for the Sanhedrin, for the High Court to sit at the time of the Holy Temple. So there were many courts. Every city had a court, a Jewish court of rabbis, usually of 23, maybe of 3, depending on significance of that court. However, the main court, the High Court, which was made up of 71 sages, was here located in the Holy Temple. And it was in this room that they sat. Now, the reason why you could see this structure is sticking out of the wall is because in the actual temple, it was forbidden to sit down. If someone did work in the temple, they were never allowed to take a seat. If you had to sit down, you had to leave the temple. The reason why this room is sticking out of the wall is because they had to create it in a way that they had to sit as the court. They had to be sitting. So they had to do it in a way that it was part of the structure, but actually outside of the structure. So it didn't have the holiness of the structure, and therefore they were allowed to sit down. That is the first room over here. Following that, we had the room where the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would stay on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, the Kohen Gadol would actually spend the entire day in the Holy Temple, and this would be his living quarters. He would actually sleep in this room. What he's going to show you now is that there was actually a mikvah on the other side of the temple, right over here. He's going to show it to you in a moment. where the Kohen Gadol would go several times throughout Yom Kippur to purify himself. The reason why they built it in a way which seems very not conducive, that he had to walk all the way around the temple to go to this mikvah, because it was literally on the other side of his room. Seemingly they should have built it right next to each other, was in order to tire him, because they were always afraid that the Kohen Gadol was actually someone that didn't care for the job, and he was trying to mess up the system. So they did a number of things to try to tire him, that if he was someone that wasn't sincere, he wouldn't hold on to the job. And one of them was to create that his room was so far away from his mikvah, and he would have to go back and forth, which was not fun. So that was the room of the Kohen Gadol. Next, we have over here these two big doors, is the main resting place for the actual Kohens, the people that would be there over the week to do the service. So the way it worked was that the Kohens would have a shift, every family another week, and during their week they would actually sleep in this location. As you can see, this room is also sticking out for the same reason, because the part that they slept in had to be outside of the holy area of the Beit HaMikdash. There was also a fire, which we'll see later, for them to warm themselves up, because they had to walk barefoot, and the floor was made out of stone. So it was very cold, and it was not fun to necessarily. It wasn't necessarily fun to spend many hours on a cold floor, and therefore they had this heating system to go and heat themselves up, as well as other rooms that existed within this room that we'll see later on. We also have another door. Let us see where he moves on. This door was meant for the sacrifices, as well as another door later that we'll see to be brought in. This door was for the women. I'm not sure exactly what it was used for, but it was for the door designated for women. This door was not necessarily used for anything specific, as much as a guarding space. There was a system of guarding the temple, not because it needed security, but more out of respect. And there were a number of areas where there were different Kohens and Levites that would stand there throughout the night guarding the temple. And this was one of those locations. There was one that would stand on the top of these steps, as well as one that would stand on this balcony right here. Moving on to the back, there was another guard that stood between these doors. And now we're coming around to the other side. And once again, there's another door here, which was meant to bring in other sacrifices, depending on the level of holiness. There was a door that was meant to bring in the flame for the Holy Temple, as well as the mikvah, again, that we saw earlier, that was right here on top of this door. This door was also used to bring in the water on Sukkot, on the holiday of Sukkot, which we poured on the altar. The joy of Sukkot was very much surrounded around this pouring of the water, which happened on Sukkot, and that water was brought through these doors. That was a whole ceremony for itself. So we covered the outside of the temple. You just saw before an image of a bird eye view, and I want to show you that because I think it might help you to understand. We're going around this wall and there's a lot going on. So this might help you. If you have any questions, please pipe in, because I feel like I'm doing a little bit too much talking on my end.
You're doing great, doing a great job.
Okay.
Thank you,
If
Rabbi.
anything is not clear, feel free to pipe in and ask. So we have over here, do you see this image?
Yes.
So this is a bird eye view of the building that I've just been showing you. The wall that I've been showing you before is this thick wall all along this area. And just to pinpoint some of the areas that you're already familiar with, over here, I don't know if you see where I'm pointing. This is the room of the Sanhedrin, of the High Court. This was the room where the Kohen would stay. This was the door for the women. This was the room that I mentioned this is where the high priest would stay. This is where the priest would stay with the fire that I spoke about before. Over here is where you have the mikvah. I don't know if you see that little blue thing. That's where the mikvah was for the Kohen. He would have to walk all the way around to the side. So this is a little bit giving you a different view. I don't know if that was helpful, a different view of the building that we're talking about, and we will revisit this in a moment. Right now, we will be entering is going to be this space over here. This space is called the Ezrat Nashim. It's called the women's section. The reason why it was called the women's section wasn't so much because it was meant for the women. It was meant for everyone. It was specifically and especially when people brought a sacrifice, they would usually congregate over here. There's also 4 rooms within this space, as you could see on the corners. Each one has a different purpose in the temple. The reason why it was called the women's sanctuary was because there was a special yearly event that happened in this space, which was the Simchat Beis HaShoeva, the joy of Sukkot, where, as I mentioned before, on Sukkot they would bring water and they would pour it onto the altar, which was very significant, and that brought a lot of joy. And they would express this joy by dancing. And during the intermediate days of Sukkot, the Jewish people would gather in this courtyard, and there would be music and there would be dancing, and the rabbis would juggle fire, and it was an incredible joy. And they say if someone didn't see the joy of Sukkot, they've never seen real joy in their life. And there was a special balcony, as you can see, a special balcony along here on both sides, which had a special staircase that went up to it, and that's where the woman would stand. And that's why this courtyard was called the women's courtyard. So let us go in the video and we'll see a little bit from this view how this courtyard looked. So we see over here that around this entire structure there was a little bit of a fence which blocked off this area from the entire Temple Mount. Up until here was where a non-Jew was allowed to walk. Past this fence was only for Jewish people. Following that, we have the actual courtyard, and I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Well, it's actually speeded up already. You have over here a door. Now, these doors, we'll see a number of them throughout the temple. These doors were actually made out of gold and were covered in gold, and their dimensions were 20 amot by 10 amot, which is roughly 40 feet tall by 20 feet wide. Each one of these doors were 40 feet tall by 10 feet wide. That's pretty big for a door. And all these main doors that you'll see going in are that same dimension. There's one larger door, which I'll point out to you later on. Every part of the Holy Temple, as it got holier and holier, was on a higher plane. It was lifted up from the ground a little bit more. So the mountain in general was on a higher plane, but then this entire structure was 12 feet up, 12 steps up, which every step was a foot by a foot, like a foot tall and a foot wide. So that made up to 6 feet, roughly 6 feet. Am I making a mistake, or is it 12 feet? I don't remember. I think it's 12 feet. 6 amos, higher than the original mountain. Okay, so here we are entering the women's sanctuary, and as you can see, those balconies on the side. And as I mentioned, around this area, there were 4 rooms. The actual dimensions of this area were 135 amot by 135 amot. So that would be a square footage of, we're doubling that. So that would be a square footage of 270 feet. And here we have the 4 rooms. This room, which was one room in the corner of this area, was meant to store the wood for the actual altar. It was also a place where the Kohens that were impure and they weren't allowed to do service in the temple, they would sit in this room and they would check the wood to make sure there were no bugs, because bugs are not kosher, and therefore they didn't want that there should be any bugs on the altar. This was a room called the room for the Nazarites. So we're familiar with a Nazarite. A Nazarite is someone that says that they will not cut their hair for X amount of time, and they're not going to drink wine, etc. And when they were done that period, they would come and they would shave all their hair, as well as they would bring a special sacrifice, which they would then eat. The hair was burnt over here under these ovens. The sacrifice, after it was brought up to the altar, the parts that they ate were cooked in this room, and they actually ate it in this room. The actual visual of this room is more about the guy's imagination that built it. The third room, the third chamber within this area, as you can see again, he's showing you the bird eye view, was called the chamber of the oil. Over here, the oil that was used in the temple, as well as the water, as well as something else that I'm forgetting. In any case, those stuff were also stored over here within this room. Finally, the fourth room, which I don't know why he doesn't have a visual of that, was the chamber for the Mitzorah, for the leper, someone that got leprosy and therefore had to go through a period of cleansing. He too brought a special sacrifice, and he went to this room, and there was a mikvah actually in this room that he or she would go in to become pure. So here we covered the entire first area of the temple, which was the women's sanctuary. Here you have a small little door. I want to again show you where this door is located. So you have it over here. So here was the oils. Sorry, I passed it. Let me see if I can catch it. 1 second. So this door right here, which is a little bit of a different color than the rest of them, and you'll see why, is the main door is going into the next part of the temple where we'll have the actual altar. There's 15 steps here, which is called the Shir HaMalot. If you're familiar with the 15 chapters of the Psalms, which all start with the words Shir HaMalot, those are connected to these 15 steps. These 15 steps were where the Levites would stand and would sing and play their musical instruments. Now, talking about musical instruments, on the side, the bottom of these steps, there were 2 small doors, which he's going to show us in a minute. And these small doors led into a chamber, which actually housed, and you see these doors over here. They weren't so small, but relatively to the other doors, they were small. And this room actually housed all the musical instruments for the Levites, which they would play. Now, this room was actually located underground, essentially. What I mean by that is we will soon go up the 15 steps, going into the area of the altar, and we will see that area, which is called the chamber of the Israelites, sorry, not the chamber, but the area of the Israelites, that was right above this room with the musical instruments. So we are now going up these 15 steps, and we're entering the area for the Israelites. We can see over here that these doors, which are called Shar Nicanor, are not gold, but actually they were made out of copper. And the reason why they were made out of copper and they were not covered with gold was because the person that actually brought these doors to the Holy Temple, I believe he wasn't Jewish. He was a man by the name of Nicanor, and he loved God, and he wanted to bring a special gift for God. And he created these doors out of copper, and he had them specially handcrafted by special craftsmen in Alexandria, Egypt. And he brought it over on a ship, and there was a lot of danger involved in bringing it over, as well as there being a great flood in the ocean, a great storm happening in the ocean, and he risked his life to literally bring these doors to the temple. And because of that, the sages decided not to cover it with gold, but to leave it with its original copper as he brought it. The doors are actually named with his name, Shar Nicanor, the gate of Nicanor. That was his name. As we go in to this area, we are going to see a somewhat small area for the Israelites. So you can see a little bit of a ledge over there. There's a small step before we go up to the altar, which you see on your left. And this was called the area for the Israelites. So I'm going to go back and show you the bird eye view again. And hopefully I will give you again some clarity of what we're talking about. So we already covered this whole area, which is the Ezrat Nashim, the area of the woman. And we had these 4 rooms on each corner. Right now, we just went up these 15 steps. and we entered what's called the Ezat Yisrael, the area for the Israelites. This was where someone that wasn't a Kohen was allowed to go. Past these steps over here, if you weren't a Kohen, you were not allowed to walk past these steps. You had to stand right here. Now, the Jewish people would stand here to watch their sacrifice being brought, and on these steps, the Kohens, those that were doing the service would actually bless the Jewish people. We know the Birchat Kohanim, right? The blessing of the Kohen on the holiday, which we do in the synagogue, that would happen in the Holy Temple. And that would happen also on these steps. The dimensions of this area, of this entire area that you see, this second half of the temple, right? I don't know if you see where I'm showing you this entire area. So that was the same 135 amot this way, which was 270 feet, as well as 187 amot this way. So it would be double 187. Help me out. Something like 344 feet, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that was the length of this area right here. Let us revisit that video that we were showing you. Again, anyone that wants to pipe in and have any questions, feel free to. Is this new information for people?
Yes, it is for me. I've never gone through this, so I'm so appreciative. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, this is all new for me too.
Is this, I do have a question.
Sure, Anita,
Is
please.
this similar to the first temple,
So in
the
many
interior design?
So in many ways it was, in many ways it wasn't. This temple was built based on the information of the first temple, as well as the prophecies of Yechezkel about what the third temple will look like. So in a way it's similar to the third temple, in a way it's similar to the first temple. The first temple did not have a women's sanctuary. So that whole area that we just visited did not exist in the first temple. So that's one major difference, as well as the general dimensions were much smaller in the first temple, generally speaking. The altar was smaller, as we'll get to in a moment. But yes, in many ways, it was very similar.
Thank you.
So here we're back over here, and we're standing in the area for the Israelites. We're looking at the area of the Kohens, and on our right, I'm not sure what he's talking about in the video. Okay, here you have those steps that I spoke about where the Kohens would stand and give the blessing. There you have those small 3 doors on your left, are actually, again, one of the mikvahs that I mentioned earlier, as well as a place where they would make, I'm actually not remembering offhand, there was a room that they would make the garb for the Kohens, and many other rooms that they would do, different things that were necessary for the service in the temple. Okay, here he is going to show us the altar. The altar was a masterpiece of its own. The altar was not including this ramp that you see here. The altar's dimensions were 32 amos by 32 amos, which is roughly 64 by 64 feet. The original altar in the Mishkan in the desert was very, very, was much smaller. It was 10 by 10 feet by 10 feet. Or, no, I'm making a mistake. I think it was even smaller than that. I think it was 3 by 3. It was very small. The height was the same. The height was I think 10 amos, which was 20 feet. No, I'm mixing up my dimensions here, but it was much lower. Sorry, it was the same height throughout all the temples. However, the width actually changed. In the first temple, it was 28 by 28 amos, which was 56, right? 56 feet by 60 by 56 feet. And over here we had 64 by 64. So that was the actual altar. We also had a ramp, which was another 32 feet, another 32 amos, another 64 feet coming out. You had a little gap between this ramp and or actually, let's talk about this first. So the actual altar was split into three parts. There was the foundation, which is on the bottom. There was a landing in the middle, which the Kohen would actually walk on to sprinkle the blood at different parts. And then there was the top part of the altar. Each one of the corners of the altar also had what was called a keren, a horn, as you could see it over here. Yes, I was correct. The whole altar was 10 feet tall, including the horn. Sorry, 10 amos, which was 20 feet tall, including the horn. You had this main ramp going up, as well as a small ramp, as you can see, a mini ramp going around the middle of the altar. There was this space because when they would throw the sacrifices onto the fire, it had to go over ear space. So there was a small gap between the ramp and the altar. The reason why there was a ramp and not steps was because God said that the steps that we take in the Holy Temple should never be bringing the sacrifices shouldn't be wide steps, which would not be modest, and therefore the steps were supposed to be smaller steps. In order to create that it should be smaller steps, not a wide step, they had this ramp. There was also salt on the altar, as you can see here, for them to put onto the sacrifice as they brought it up onto the altar. Here he's showing the small mini ramps. There was also, I'm just gonna skip around over here a little bit. He's going around it. There was also two holes at the bottom where they would pour the leftover blood into after they were done sprinkling the blood around the altar. We can see over here there were two areas of the altar that didn't have a foundation. Do you see that? So you can see that over here there's a foundation, and you've seen on the other two sides there was a foundation going around, and over here there's missing that part. There's missing that foundation. Do we see that? Yes, Lisa sees that. So the reason why that was missing, as you'll see, is because the altar, which was perhaps the most important part of the entire temple, if not the second to most important part after the Holy Ark, had to be located in the tribe of Benjamin's territory. Now you're going to see something very interesting, which is that you could see the yellow and the gray. The gray is the tribe of Benjamin, and the yellow area actually already belongs to Judah. This area particularly going over the Temple Mount was where their areas divided. And because the altar had to be located within the tribe of Benjamin, therefore there was missing a part of that foundation. Tell me if you have any questions about that, but I think that made sense. Here again, he's showing you that bird's eye view of where the tribe of Judah box off versus the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, let us go into the next part. Let's see. Okay, here he's showing us the old altars versus this altars. That was the original altar in the Mishkan, the small one you see over there. There was the altar of the first temple, and then there was the altar of the second temple. I'm going to actually relocate because this room is going to be used in a minute. Oh, hi, Melcy. Or maybe I guess I'll wait till people show up over here, and then I'll relocate. Okay, so let us move on a little bit. This area over here was where they would take down the ash from the altar. They would put it here until the Kohen would go ahead and take it out. Come, Melcy, you want to come? No. Okay. What's next over here? So he's going to show us a. Let's skip around a little bit. He speaks about the building of the altar, which is actually interesting. The altar, being that it was a place for. Hi, Musty. Say hi to everyone in the video. You want to say hi?
Hi, Yossi.
Hi, Mussy.
Hi.
Say hi. Say hi.
Nice to see
Tell them your
you.
cereal.
Hi, Yossi.
So the actual altar wasn't allowed to have any cut stones. In general, no iron was allowed to be brought into the temple or on the Temple Mount. And therefore any stone that was used for the temple had to be cut outside the temple and then brought into the temple. However, the altar wasn't allowed to have any cut stones at all. And the reason for that is because iron actually brings about death, and therefore God said that I don't want any iron in my temple, especially on the actual altar. And therefore, the way this was built is they had to choose the exact stones to fill up this area. As you could see before, they created these frames, and they would fill it up with the stone. They would then layer it with they would fill it up with cement, and they created these different layers with that system by literally using full stones. Nothing was cut, and filling it up until they were able to create the entire altar. And then once that was done, they covered the entire thing, as well as the ramp. Okay, I think we are going to be moving on. Here is the big flame. You have the small flames. Here is holes within the altar where they would pour the wine as well as the water that I spoke about before on Sukkot. You want to say hi to them? So that's the water.
Hi.
Hi.
And
Hi,
then,
Yossi.
okay, we are moving over here. We're moving along. So here we have, right on the right side of the altar is on your left. On the right side, this was called the slaughterhouse. And believe it or not, in the Holy Temple, there was a whole area that was designated for slaughtering the sacrifices. And that was right over here. You could see over here that there were 24 rings that were held down that were used to slaughter the animals. There were also special hooks to skin them, as well as tables to take them apart. Part of them would be brought up onto the altar, while other parts would be eaten and brought into the various rooms that we've seen earlier, as well as the room that we'll see right now. These two big doors that you see in front of you are the other side of the Beit HaMoked. So I mentioned to you before, and I'm going to go back to the aerial view, that there's a room right here called the Beit HaMoked. That was the place that the Kohens would sleep, as well as where they would hang out. So they would eat their sacrifices there. There was a big fire in the middle to keep them warm. And that's the room that we're looking at right now from the inside view. So we're going to go back there and we're going to see a little bit of how it looked. Obviously, it's about imagination. So he has his own way of how it looks. You see the flame that was in the middle. You also see the benches on the side where he thinks they slept. Perhaps the beds were a little more comfortable than that, but I don't know for sure. And then there were also within this room 4 rooms on each one of the corners. Some of them were meant to prepare to actually eat the sacrifices. This is where they would eat their sacrifices, where the Kohens would eat parts that were meant for them. There was a room with the stones of the altar that became unpure, that became unusable. They would put them in one of these rooms here, as well as other things that it was used for. This room that he's pointing to right now was the room where the holy bread was stored, which we'll see later. Again, this is the area where they would sacrifice it all. And moving along, because we're running out of time, we have the small area between the altar and the holy. Here you have the water basin, the kior. This is the place where the Kohens would wash their hands before starting the service. You can see that over the years they've added more faucets to make it more available. Another thing they added, which was interesting, is they added a leverage system to lift the kior up and to put it down into a well. They built a well right next to the kior, and in that well they would put the kior during the night. And the reason for this, as you can see over here, you see the system, how they would lift it up and they would put it down into this well. The reason is because they weren't allowed to purify themselves with water that was out overnight. The water had to be connected to a live stream overnight. And until they built this system, they had to schlep new water every morning into the Holy Temple. Once they built the system, the actual entire water basin would go into this well. It would probably also fill it up, as well as guard it overnight, so it wouldn't be considered overnighted water. And then they would once again bring it out in the morning and use it. Again, you're talking about a time before electricity, and they would use it to purify themselves. Moving along, so here we have some of the rooms on the left side. I'm standing inside from the left side of the temple. We spoke about some of them earlier. There was the mikveh before. Here you have a room where they would make the incense. He's going to take us up into this room in a moment, I think. But this was where they would make the incense that was used inside on the smaller altar, as we'll see soon. There was a special family that knew how to make the incense. It was a special secret, and they would do it up here in this room. There is also some of the rooms here that we spoke about before, but we've mentioned most of them, so we're gonna move on to the main sanctuary. Okay, he is now giving us a little bit of a tour of the actual main sanctuary here, where this is the main doors going up with another 12 steps, I believe. And I want to talk about this from the bird's eye view. So, are we with me over here? We see the screen. Okay. So this is the area that we're talking about over here, this sanctuary right here. And as you'll see in a moment, there are generally three parts to this area. It's divided into three. There's what was called the hall. That's this area right here. There was the holy, which is this area. And then there was the Holy of Holies, which is this area. The hall had two rooms on either side, which were used to store the knives that the Kohanim would use to slaughter the animals. Along in the walls of the Holy and the Holy of Holies all along here were various rooms as well as attics. So there was a system of how to go to the top of the roof of the temple, and it was meant for a few reasons. Number one, there was a sewage system. Any water that came onto the roof of the temple would filter out through these tunnels. There was another area here which was meant for storage, as well as we'll see soon. Let's see 1 second. We won't make noise, okay? You want to say hi to everyone on the screen? Want to show them your stack?
Hi, Yossi.
So in the second floor, which we'll see soon, there was actually a window that you were able to lower someone down into the Holy of Holies. And the reason for this is because if the Holy of Holies was needed of repair, we didn't want that a repairman to just walk in from the main entrance. That wouldn't be considered respectful. The actual Holy of Holies, no one ever entered besides for the high priest on Yom Kippur. But the way that they would actually fix this room is that they would lower a repairman through a box. They would put him in a box, and the box was closed from three sides. So he was only able to see the one area that he needed to see that was in need of repair, and they would lower it. It would remain in the ear, and like that he was able to repair whatever was in need of repair. This would happen through the second floor window going down into the Holy of Holies. We will see that in a moment. I just wanted to give you that background. And I think now you'll have a better idea of what he's showing you in this video. So here he's showing you the general outline of those three locations. The dimensions of this area is 100 amos by 100 amos, which is roughly 200 by 200 feet. Maybe 175 by 175 feet. And that wall that is showing you now is where the Holy as well as the Holy of Holies was located within. He decided that he wants to show you what it looked relative to the Mishkan, but the Mishkan wasn't actually there. This golden wall wasn't actually there. He's just showing you what it was relative to the Mishkan. And then you have these tunnels that were all along on the side with special staircases going up that would take you to other chambers as well as to the attic and the second floor of the Holy of Holies. You have this ramp that's going up. On the other side, there was a ramp that was used for the water sewage system, as I mentioned. And he's going to show you in a moment the second floor. You can see the partition between the Holy and the Holy of Holies went along both floors. And over here was the window that they would lower down the workerman into the Holy of Holies to do any repairs. I think you'll have an image of that in a moment, possibly. Let's see. That's what he does. Okay, I guess not. Okay, this was the hall, the first room that happened in this area. These are the two small rooms that they stored their knives in, that they would use to sacrifice. And then this brings us to the general structure. There was also these points on the top so that birds should not sit on top and dirty the roof of the temple. There were these 5 beams that came up from over here, which were simply for decoration. There was also this grapevine that any money that was given to the temple until it was used would be translated into a golden grape that was put onto this vine for beauty. Okay, let us move along and enter the actual sanctuary. There were two tables on the 2 sides of the main doors, as he just showed you, which were meant for the holy breads. The bread coming in as well as the bread going out would be put onto these 2 tables. This entry, which did not have a door, but it only had a curtain, was called the entry to the hall. And this entry was actually double the size of all the other large entries that we've seen. This was the largest entry within the Holy Temple. It was 20 by 40 amos, which is roughly, again, if we're saying that amos is double, roughly 80 by 40 feet. So that's very, very large. I mentioned that the other entryways were only 20 by 10, which would be 40 by 20 feet. So it was double the other entryways. This is the holy. This was the area of the holy where only a priest that was doing the service would go. And there were 3 main parts within this area. The first was this mizbeach, the golden mizbeach, the golden altar. And this altar was used for the incense. This is where they would bring the incense onto this altar here. That would happen once a day, I believe. There was also the menorah that you can see over here. It had 3 small steps, and there would be a Kohen that would come and prepare the wicks as well as the oil, and then they would light the menorah twice a day or once a day, depending on the opinion. That's how the menorah looked according to the Maimonides. And there are various opinions of exactly how it stood, but this is definitely one of those opinions of how it stood. And there were a lot of intricate parts of this menorah, the goblets and all the different designs that were part of this menorah. These stands were used for the high priest when he would go into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, on the holiest day of the year. He would put down the tool that he was using to sprinkle the blood. He would put it down over here. This table was for the holy bread, which we mentioned before, and this bread was switched once a week. Miraculously, it would stay fresh throughout the week, and the Kohens of that week would eat it, and it would be switched out every Saturday. And that was the 2 tables outside where the new bread would come in, and the old bread would go out, and it would sit here in the holy. Okay, finally, we have the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies had a curtain. In the first temple, it actually had a wall with a door. In the second temple, it only had a curtain for a number of reasons. There was actually 2 curtains. One curtain, so how do I describe this? I think over here in this aerial picture, I'll be able to show it to you. You have 2 curtains. If I would zoom in, you can see how one curtain had an opening on this side and the other curtain had an opening on that side. So no one would actually see the actual Holy of Holies at any point. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, when he would go in, he would walk through this area and he would walk along the two curtains until he got to the other entrance. And then he would walk in and he would walk to the middle of the room, and this is where he would stand between the two arms of the ark, of the Holy Ark. So going back to the video, it's my WhatsApp. Going back to the video, here we have the Holy Ark. Now he just made this image to show us what it would have looked like in the first temple, but in reality, the Holy Ark never existed in the second temple because, as I mentioned, it was hidden and was put away under the Temple Mount. And well, the only thing that was actually there was a rock, as you could see, as well as the cherubim, the image of those two angels with their wings going over. Now, although these cherubim didn't exist because they are part of the ark, but the larger cherubim, as you could see, they were larger cherubim. They did exist, and they were there in the second temple as well. Okay. We also, do we have anything else? I think we summed it up. There's an incredible story about these cherubim that it says that when the Jewish people were sinning, when they were not loved by God, the cherubim would actually turn their backs to each other miraculously. And then when they were in a place of love, the cherubim would actually be hugging each other. And the story is told that when Titus, the Roman general, came in, and when he destroyed the temple, when he destroyed the Holy Temple, when he entered this room, he actually saw the cherubim embracing each other, which showed that God was showing us that even when the temple was being destroyed because of our sins, God said, I love you. And that's something that we're holding on to until he brings us back to Jerusalem and he rebuilds that temple for us, and which will be even greater than this incredible place that we've just seen. And we're looking forward to that. And until then, we are told that the temple is created within every single one of us. Every single one of us have our own temple. We have our physical temple that we go to pray, as well as the temple within our own home, creating a space for God within our own home, as well as within our own heart, creating that space for God up until we will merit Mashiach, and we will have a physical temple once again with all the Jewish people in Jerusalem.
Amen, amen.
I think I finished my class with this. Do we have any questions that anyone wants to ask?
No.
Please. I need to go for it.
So the second temple I read just now, actually, was 70 years later than the first temple.
Correct. That's
And
exactly right.
So the first temple was King Solomon. So who would be the one for the second? King Herod or Zeppo?
King Herod was the one that built it, correct? The original prophet started the building, I believe, was Ezra. And as well as we know Mordechai, right? We know the story of Mordechai from Purim. So that was just around this time period. King Cyrus, the original King Cyrus, who gave permission to build it, was King Ahasuerus's father. So we're familiar with Ahasuerus, the king from the story of Purim. His father was the original one that gave the permission to build the temple once again, and it was stopped by King Ahasuerus because of Haman as well as because of Vashti. They stopped the building, and when Esther's son, Esther had a son, became the next king after Ahasuerus, right? Queen Esther had a son. When that son became king, he gave the green light to continue building the Holy Temple. But again, it was in ruins, and it wasn't a proper structure until King Herod came around many years later, after the Hanukkah story, I believe, and built this beautiful structure.
Beautiful. Is there any documentation, archaeological proof of to that, validate some of these things
There's
that
a
we,
lot. There's a ton. There's a ton. You'd have to do some of your own research. There's a few good, resources. So first of all, I just discovered an app. It's not a Jewish app, it's a Christian app. But they, I'm trying to see what it's called. You can find it on your app store. The app would be called, let me see what this is called. The app is called Immersive Harrods Temple. So you could download that, Immersive Harrods Temple. It's a free app, and they built a 3D whole temple, second temple. It's not exactly accurate, but a lot of things are accurate. And you could give yourself a tour of the temple, literally walking through the temple, and you'll see a lot of beautiful, amazing things. That's one area that you could look at. There's also a lot of videos and articles and so many different things that you could find, especially with archaeological digging and stuff that they found throughout the years from this temple as well as from the previous temples. There are also a lot of other parts that we didn't cover in this class, but you could see that over there. There's also the website, a great website. I don't know if I have it open here. Let me see if I have it open. Let me stop my sharing, and then I can see what I have open. There's a website. There's a blog. I don't have it open here. Let me see. I have it here. There's a blog called BeisHamikdash.com. BeisHamikdash.com, BeisHamikdoch.com. And this blog has many videos as well as images that people have made of their own, recapturing the image of the temples, the first as well as the second.
Can you
If you
spell that
go
again, Rabbi? I'm just trying to follow.
BeisHamikdash.com, just how it sounds. Beis, Beis, Hamikdash. That's the Hebrew terminology for the Holy Temple. Beis Hamikdash, HAMIKDOCH.com. There is also a video from OU that I've seen recently where he takes you down to the archaeological digs and he shows you where the old temple was and where the new temple was. BA, have you been there recently? Have you seen that? No. So you could actually go there, you get tours over there. They built an image of the temple that I've just shown you. They built like a pretty large image, maybe like a room size. And obviously very small. You could see the whole Temple Mount, and they built it in the same direction so that you're looking at the Kotel, and they say that that's the wall right there that you're looking at. It's pretty incredible. So next time, BA, you take your trip, or next time any of us go there, we will have to check it out. And I think we have a whole different appreciation for the Western Wall. They even show you in that video, which is incredible, how in the archaeological digs, they found how there were a lot of stores there in that area by the Western Wall. You would think, what was there? Today, the Western Wall is a synagogue for all practical purposes. But in those days, the synagogue was actually the temple. So that area, the courtyard of the Western Wall that we sit and pray, was actually used simply for selling goods and buying their sacrifices and getting ready and tidying up, and like all these stores and little things that happened there. They even found an old Roman.
Shopping quarter, or are you talking about the tunnels below that?
So that quarter didn't exist because that quarter was built on top of what was the quarter originally. So I'm talking about the original quarter, right? They actually have it under there.
Below, yeah.
Right.
That
If you walk under, you'll actually see this area today. They even found something that they weren't sure what it was until they realized that it was a mini, um, help me with the word, a mini Roman, what was it called that they would build for like gladiator stuff? What was it called? Like
Oh,
Goth, like Gothic,
like a Colosseum, like
pillars. Yeah.
a mini Colosseum that apparently the Romans again wanted to take away from the Holy Temple. They wanted that people should forget that there was such a building.
Mhm.
They've built literally within a few feet of the Western Wall, of the original Western Wall. They built the Colosseum. So,
Right.
that should become the hotspot, and people should kind of forget of what that area was really all about. Yeah, so you're definitely welcome to continue doing research and looking into it and studying about it. There's the Jessica, the Prophet Yecheskel, which is one of the one of the books of the Torah, one of the 24 books of the Torah, describes what the third temple would look like, and much of that is like the second temple. So you could also look into that as well. There's so much to learn and to research and to read. This is just a little bit of getting a visual of what it was all about.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much,
much.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
My pleasure. My
Bye,
pleasure.
everybody.
Next
Thank
week,
you.
bye-bye.
next week there
Yeah.
will not be a class. Next week is the fast, the 9th of Av, so
Ah,
there will not be a fast next week. So
okay.
hopefully I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
Have an
So
easy fast.
before you go, I
Welcome.
want to tell you, when I went there, my experience was so interesting for me because I had never been before. And we saw that there were bar mitzvahs happening, obviously, like just little pockets, like tiny pocket of people having lots of joy. And then, so my son went down one where the men go, and I went where the women are, and I could see women on the side leaning over to try to join all the bar mitzvahs on that side. But I went up to the wall and I took my time, and I actually said all the things that people asked me to say in my own stuff, and I put things in the wall. Very hard to get things in the wall, by the way. No one explained how hard it is to find a crevice. And I was a little taller than most. I still had like a hard time. But everyone had a siddur, and I had no idea how everyone knew to bring this from home. And I have my mother's wedding siddur. It's a little tiny one. I thought about bringing, and I didn't. So I just figured I missed the opportunity. I knew because I went to the Ohel to back out. So I shuffle backwards, trying not to hit people. And I see there's a whole wall of Siddurs and Tehillim and stuff. And I was like, oh, cheaters. So I'm going to go cheat too. So I got myself a book, and then I shuffled back to the front, and I did all the morning prayers. I did,
So special.
just everything. And then when I was doing the Amidah, though, I paused because the woman next to me was struggling to find a spot in the wall. So I helped her like get her paper in. But then other papers fell, and I was like, oh my God, I'm making a disaster. So I'm trying to get them back into parts of the wall. It was like it was so like, it was meaningful, but it was also like cracked me up a little bit. And then I did all the rest, what I wanted to do. And just even putting your hands on the wall or leaning your forehead in. I mean, and everyone around you, there was just a feeling that you were just in exactly the same space we are in comfort when we're together, but I was with complete strangers in a place I had never been before. And it was 100% familiar, and just, I don't know, it was just outstanding. And then we intentionally didn't do everything we wanted to do because I wanted to make sure we knew this was only my first trip. So we did a lot of shopping. It was my birthday, so we did a lot of shopping. And you couldn't find that much stuff, but when we walked in a place, a nice jewelry place, and nobody harasses you, then it's a little bit easier, better. And every person we met told us that they just don't have the same foot traffic that they used to for the shops. They they said they're busy, like they have the same traffic all year because everyone's having some holiday. They said for all the religions that come here, there's always someone's holiday, someone's visiting. But it was interesting how the foot traffic was a lot less, but the people, every person was just so kind. And the two shop owners that we befriended, one in jewelry, one in like scarves, they talked to Ben so kindly and said, come back and we'll just have coffee and we'll just talk. And if you need something, like just like a friend would. So anyway, the whole experience that day was great. We went into
Wow.
regular part of Jerusalem and other markets to eat. And we ate like from everything. We just ate we just constantly ate. But yeah, it was really just so meaningful. So I just wanted to share that. It was like, I'm sure just a
Yeah.
simple experience everyone has, but for me, it was, I don't know, it was really terrific. And I felt so great to carry messages from our own community, I talked to a number of people in our community and brought forward messages, and obviously your dad gave me some things to remind me to say for the whole community. So it was really wonderful. So come home and have this. It was really timely. Thank you.
Very special. Very special. And should be even more timely. We should have the actual structure. We shouldn't just have remembrance or a video
Right.
wall. We should have it itself. Okay. Thank you for joining me today.
Take care. Thank you, Rabbi Levy.
All the
Bye.
best.
Yeah.
Thank